Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Kaiju Kingdom podcast. We are your hosts,
Jessica.
and I am Chris Eaton. Oh, my goodness. We can finally talk about what you and I got to see in Japan with the rest of the people, Jessica.
Yes. Yes.
This is the big -1 review episode. It's been this is Wednesday, so we're close to a week since its release. So, giving everybody time that wanted to see it to go see it, and looking at the box office charts, a lot of people actually showed up for a Japanese Godzilla movie,
Yes. Yes.
and I am beyond blown away by the absolute universal belovedness of this movie. Like I'm astonished. I never thought I would see the day when I'm seeing a Godzilla movie being compared to a Christopher Nolan film. We are living. Some would say we're living in the darkest timeline. I would argue we are living in the best timeline because this is a day I have, as a movie nerd, I have only dreamed of. As a Godzilla fan, and I'm pretty sure you've taken slack from friends of yours. I have taken slack as well almost my entire life for loving these goofy movies about a giant mutated dinosaur who spits fire, fights a big moth and a three-headed dragon, and we're always looked down upon as these kind of, fun, but overall B-grade cinema that was nothing above beyond children's entertainment. -1 changed the damn game this past week. So we're going to go into the review of the episode, but the atmosphere that I have seen in the last week, I feel like Ebenezer Scrooge after the three spirits have come and visited him, and I'm opening the window and I'm screaming down to the townsfolk, and I'm like, "You there, boy? What day is this?" And he's just looking up. It's Godzilla Day, sir. I'm like, yes, it is. Like the Grinch in me, the hardest. God. I am feeling vindicated as a fan this weekend. I've kept my temperament low online. I am so happy that everyone has been enjoying this movie, but deep down inside, I am taking a victory lap as a longtime Godzilla fan because finally, the rest of the film nerds, the rest of the snobby critics, the general public have turned out not for an American Godzilla movie, but for a Japanese Godzilla movie, and are hailing it as one of the absolute best films they've seen this year. And I've seen some go to say almost this, early in this decade, but we're counting in the decade from 12 to 12 or 13 to 13. Get my years mixed up. One of the finest pieces of cinema they've ever seen. I never thought I would see this day, Jessica. Never. This is a glorious moment for all of us.
Yes. It is the highest critically acclaimed film for this year. And I know that even people who are just movie lovers and movie goers, or like, oh, I went because my relatives wanted to go see it, so I went to go see it.
Mm-hmm.
They came out also really loving the film and really liking the film. And I've seen more than one person say that they cried during the film because it is very emotionally impactful. And I will say it helps to know the history, or if you are related to people of Japanese, descent. However, it also still is impactful for you if you understood not even just the history, but just an empathy or compassion of the hardships that they're going through. Even if, yes, you are not spoilers abound, even if you're not a kamikaze pilot, whatever, they lived in hard times post-war. There are people now who are refugees or know what it's like living in hard times post-war. So you don't necessarily have to be that to relate, but there are people who are like, oh, I relate. And there are those who don't relate. They just felt sad for the characters. So
Hmm.
they said that it was very well written. And I know it took the director, the writer, and the visual effects guy, Yamazaki,
Hmm.
quite some time to get to like perfect it.
Yes.
So he definitely was able to put in a lot of the human aspects of it that I think could make you connect. And if you
Hmm.
just liked Godzilla, then you also enjoyed the film very much as well.
Well, I so I had a conversation with our good friend Kazuki while we were awaiting for the Godzilla ride at the Cuban
Oh
theme park.
yes, yes. When you guys were when we were all in Japan.
Yes, and so it was the first time we really got to talk about the movie. Now, as we mentioned in the last episode, recapping our trip to Japan, you and I both got to watch the movie out there, but you
Yes.
had the added advantage of seeing it at the Tokyo International Film Festival, where I didn't know this at the time. You saw it subtitled,
I
but
did.
I, the dirty foreigner, had to sit there and watch it in its native tongue. Now, going in, I wasn't too bumped by that because I have devoured so much Japanese cinema in my nearly 40 years on this planet that, um, like, if I watch a French film, like, it's a little jarring because that language I'm not so accustomed to. If I watch, like, I can, like, if I watch a Hong Kong movie and I watch a Japanese movie, because I've watched so many of them, the language just blends. Like, I've watched so much stuff with subtitles that, like, it just, it doesn't even sound like it. I know they're speaking the tongue, but it doesn't even sound like they're speaking the tongue to me anymore.
Right.
So, um, as I'm sitting talking with Kazuki, we're discussing the film, and he's like, "Well, what'd you think?" I'm like, honestly, in my delirium that I saw the movie in, because I was up for like 26 hours at that point, I still walked away going, "Damn, that was definitely something special." Like, I still got the gist of the story. I'm like, I kind of broke it down. He's like, yeah, those are the beats, but I don't know the characters' names. There are definitely details that I'm missing, but I got this guy did this, survived this, met this girl, met this kid. Clearly, the girl and the kid are not related. Like, that is, I'm like, this is how good this movie is that it speaks cinema that if you don't even speak the language, you were able to follow the movie. And then he started breaking down, like, okay, well, that, he's like, this, I I asked him, it's like, I know Yamazaki's a big name director in Japan. He's like, very much so. And I was always under the impression he's kind of like the George Lucas of Japan because of his pushing the effects work. And he went, no, no, no. He's like, I'm hard pressed, but the best comparison, he's kind of like Japan's Spielberg. I'm like, really? He's like, oh yes, like, very much so. Even though he does genre films, but like his dramas are very, they're very big out here. They are, they're looked at much like, and Kazuki knows his films. He is steeped in film study. Like, that man knows his all. Like, he's like any good film buff. He knows cinema across the world,
Yes.
especially Spielberg, because I know for a fact Jurassic Park is his favorite film of all time. So, he did say, he's like, this is, this, he did kind of say, he's like, this would be equivalent if, in America, if Spielberg did decide to pick up a Godzilla movie and make his own version. That is how it is out here in Japan. I'm like, it did come off like that because, like I said, if I could sit there and not understand a single word that was, other than a couple little phrases and stuff that I know, and still get the story, the gestalt, if you will, of the story, that's damn good filmmaking. Like, if I had gone and watched Shin, now you actually went and watched Shin in Japan when it came out, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Now, You didn't see it with subtitles though, right?
I did not see it with subtitles. No.
So that had to have been a little harder to follow because that movie talks at a mile a minute and there is so much jargon going on.
Yeah.
Which one was easier for you to follow in terms of like when we watched it versus, watch this versus when you watched that? What would you say was the easier one to follow?
The easier one to follow without subtitles would
Mm-hmm.
have to be Godzilla Minus One,
Mm-hmm.
because there was a lot more bureaucracy and
Yeah.
politics and like what happens behind closed doors of a government, of what
Mm-hmm.
they try to do when you have I'm gonna call Godzilla a natural disaster.
Yeah.
So when you watch Shin and most of it is taking place at an office or at a meeting, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what they're saying, it could be the most riveting Aaron Sorkin like dialogue for all you know, or it could be written by a 12-year-old. You don't
Yeah.
know. But because afterwards, I think it came out in America later in English, and I saw it again here in
Mm-hmm.
English, and I liked it even more the
Yeah.
second time because the translation was so
Mm-hmm.
well done that
Mm-hmm.
the moments of bureaucracy and meetings and the characters trying to figure out what's going on, and you realize that the female is the female character is the one who pretty much puts the plan together and figures things out.
Mm-hmm.
All of that dialogue is written very, very well. It was
Yeah.
translated very well.
Mm-hmm.
So it made me realize what I missed the first time when I saw it in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like for me, my memory was all Office, Godzilla
Mm-hmm.
being a disco ball because it
Mm-hmm.
was, he did it. Office, disco ball, Office, disco ball. So I was like, I could only judge it by Godzilla's powers and action scenes. I couldn't actually
Yeah.
judge dialogue because I don't know what they're saying and it's unfair. But
Mm-hmm.
this one, even if you didn't know what was going on, and yes, you do miss a lot of nuances and very, very, very important facts,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell this is a pilot who then lived through World War II. Times are hard. Somehow he's with a woman and a child, right? Let's say
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then he's clearly PTSD traumatized by whatever he saw. He
Mm-hmm.
made friends on the boat. He has a new job.
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla comes, woman dies. He is now, rival,
Rack, the
rival,
survivor's guilt's even more. Yeah.
yeah, and then goes out into a plane that an old colleague makes or fixes for him, and he fights him. That's the gist. If you
Yes.
knew nothing else, if you
Yes.
knew nothing else, and I feel like what was great and magical about this is the fact that this story was much more streamlined,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why it was easier to follow, regard of whatever language you saw it in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting with Spielberg because obviously they were a lot of comparisons, but Spielberg's one positive, he has many positive traits, but one
Mm-hmm.
of his positive traits of storytelling is his human characters, which is clearly shown in Yamazaki's film
Very much
because
so.
he actually liked the characters or felt bad for the characters or disliked the characters. And it was very well done in that aspect because I'm gonna be
Mhm.
honest. In 2014 Godzilla, I just remember Ford
Yeah.
by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and then I
Mm-hmm.
just felt like I guess if you served in the military, you would feel some connection with him, or if you were a family man. But like, I watched it and I was like, "Eh." And then same thing with the second film,
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla King of the Monsters. I just liked the kaiju action. I was like, characters are fine.
Yeah.
I guess the mom made a point about humans being viruses. I don't know. But this one, I actually felt like I knew the characters and I felt what they were going through in their journey. So, see, I didn't even remember the names of the
Yeah.
second film.
So let's break this down because um the second viewing when I finally got all the nuances, like the first thing, like I didn't like when I initially watched this movie, I didn't know that the main character was a kamikaze pilot that abandoned his post. Like that,
Yes.
I
Yes.
Kazuki brought that up to me, and then you reiterated it, and I'm like, that was a kind of a big thing to understand because you
Yes.
know
Yes.
the way the movie opens is when he lands that plane, and there's the whole thing like hey, you just, it give at least the date and everything comes on. So if you know your World War II, like okay, we're in the dying days of the war, and clearly something's going on, and it just that part was lost. And so I'm sitting there now knowing like you guys had told like Kazuki and you had told me going, I'm like, oh, that just adds a whole nother layer to what I just watched. So going in
Yes.
the second time, like now I'm okay, now I'm prepped. So now I can factor that in, and let's see what I missed. And yes, it's definitely because we're going to be kind of jumping around a bit, but and by the way, we said again, we're going to reiterate, this is just going to be a spoiler-ish top to bottom review because there's really no way to discuss this film without really delving into it. Because at the end, when we got done watching Japan and that ending popped up, and I believe I turned to you and said, that was a great movie, but I call shenanigans on that ending. And it wasn't until Kazuki pointed out to me, he's like, yeah, but do you remember the black thing on her neck?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, what was that? He's like, that's the shin ending. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, here's what you missed. And in the middle of the film, after the attack on Giza, they're talking about the Godzilla cells like spreading, like the fact there's chunks of them like all over the place, and that they're not sure what the environmental impact would be. And he's like that's that quiet. He's like that's your inception moment of, is he still in the dream? That's the dreidel just tilting enough that like, okay, he's probably not dreaming, but there's something more going on here. And he's been very good. He actually picked up the novelization, which does add a little more depth to some of the stuff. And yes, the cells, the fact that Godzilla can regenerate, that plays an aspect of possibly how she survived and the ongoing impact that Godzilla will have. Kind of almost like the atomic bomb analogy without being as heavy handed as one would maybe say that the original movie is, because at the end of the day, this isn't even so much about the bomb. Like so when I was watching all these previews and stuff, knowing full well that this is another solo movie, and the time frame of it, like going back like right after the war, like we're going before even the original movie. It's like almost like 8 years before the first movie. And just the previews, like you see the bomb and everything, and so it's like, oh, what are they going to do with this? Oh, no, like the aspect's still there, but you're removing any, in a way, you're removing any of the military intervention, you're removing any government, and it's all just the people.
Yes.
And that I think is what really that I think is what's getting to people most of all in across every language barrier that have seen this movie, is the fact that Yamakaze managed to do what everyone complains about, is that God, no one ever really cares about the human characters. And at the end of the day, when this movie's done, you cared more about the human characters than you actually cared about watching the Godzilla action. Like you are engrossed by the arc that these characters have, and every single one of them are, even the side characters, are these fleshed out human, like they feel like real people. They feel genuine. Like the acting that's coming, the performances are coming across. Like you're sitting there, and you're like, damn, like he did it. He did the thing that like everyone thought you could never do, because it's always the idea of like, well, no one's there to watch the humans. They're just ancillary characters to move the story along. No, this time Godzilla is the ancillary character to move the story along, and you are following the drama that's going on. It turned from a Godzilla movie to a drama that happens to have Godzilla in it, and I thought that was a stroke of genius on
Yeah.
Yamazaki's part.
He also
Like,
made it so the characters, when they reacted, it
mm-hmm,
was, how would I put it? It was realistic
mm-hmm,
to how a person would react to news that's been told to them. Like when he says, "Oh, we're not married.
yeah,
I'm not married to her yet." And the guy's like, "Are you stupid? Like
yeah,
she's amazing. You
yeah,
should like you should have married her." Or the
mm-hmm,
fact that Koichi finally tells, you know, Noriko
mm-hmm,
about he sees something primitive on an island and it's like messing him up, his PTSD. I don't She doesn't be like, "Oh, I don't believe you. You're crazy. I don't
yeah,
think it's real." She just is like, she listens and then comforts
yes,
him, and then later on, she sees it from her train
and
when
she's like,
she's on the
oh,
way to Ginza, and
he's
then
not,
she's not like, "Oh, he wasn't lying about it." She
yeah,
saw it and knew exactly what it was.
yes,
So, it wasn't like there was no not realistic way. Even the way they explained without damaging
mm-hmm,
why the US is not involved was
mm-hmm,
directly taken from our own history,
mm-hmm,
and it wasn't like, "Oh, the US are such bastards, they never came to help." It actually made sense why the
because
US could not make a movement during that time, and it
mm-hmm,
made it so it was realistic to history, but also
mm-hmm,
didn't alienate the US audience or make the US audience history look bad. So, Yamazaki really, like, did his research and
yeah,
really knew how to craft the story in a way that there was no, I mean, there are villains, but there's no real villains. Like no one's really, even the way they acknowledged the way Japan went, the
they went about
consequences
it. Yeah,
of World War II, even they did it
yeah,
in a very eloquent way of like how
yes,
they said it and stuff. So I felt it was, yeah, like you were saying, you cared about the characters. Everything was kind of genuine and authentic and
mm-hmm.
realistically done. And the little girl Akiko was adorable as hell. So she
Oh,
was
of
so
course,
cute. Like, and
just
even
yeah,
the neighbor, Shigeko, I think, she turned out to be. She started out, and I think it was important to know why he was a failed kamikaze
mm-hmm,
pilot is because he wanted to live because the letter from his parents is like, we just want you to come home. And like,
mm-hmm,
how can you blame someone for wanting to live? It's in every creature's DNA and instinct.
mm-hmm,
She At that time, that type of culture blamed you for not sacrificing yourself and winning the war, and so all her children are dead. And then that
mm-hmm.
whole character turns around at the end
Oh
and
God,
then
yeah,
ends up
that art.
taking care.
Well,
I've never liked it when the character is an a-hole in the beginning and ends up being an a-hole, and there's like
mm-hmm,
no growth in
yeah.
that character.
So yeah, no, it the because again, the movie takes place over a 3 year time,
I think it's
3 years.
3 years. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
45 to 47,
yeah.
which is also just ingenious to like really set up. Get you do believe that it gives you time, like you do feel the passage of time. The characters are growing, the country's rebuilding, um, and it's as people as you start moving away from the war and resuming life, there's that. All right, that happened, and the world is going to keep turning, so we have to keep moving forward. But we're still in the rebuilding process. Um, to even the point, like yes, the fact that he is he abandoned his post, but that is not the driving force of this movie at the same time. Like yes, there's a bit of shame that he carries for you know um, not doing his national duty, but the way that Yamazaki frames the PTSD of everything was absolutely, and something I did not see coming. Like I let out an audible whole what like the only other time I let an audible out like that was in Rogue One when they're teasing Grand Moff Tarkin and you see the CG Tarkin and he's looking at the window, and you kind of see the reflection. I'm like, oh, this is how they're gonna. And then he turns around, he's talking to the screen. I yelled, "Get the hell out of! Are you kidding me right now?" Like, and by the way, my buddy George is shaking me violently because he's like, "Can you believe this is what's going on?" So, which by the way, I have to say this: when Jessica and I were watching this movie, this like was it like 8 minutes in, 8 to 10 minutes in when they're on Odo Island,
Yeah, yeah.
and it gets to the night. I'm fairly awake at this point because I'm like, okay, so, and I knew there was going to be something because Bandai kind of let it slip. There's a Monster A, so I'm assuming something's coming. So there's either going to be another form or Godzilla's going to further mute, something like that. I did not expect at all, of all things, to pull out of the library Godzilla goddamn Saurus. When that thing showed up, I screamed, "Are you effing kidding me right now?" And I turn and I see Jessica just doing this, like, she's like, look at this. I was completely flabbergasted. When this thing saunters onto the screen, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me right now. And not only that, the very first thing that goes through my mind is, because I have stared at this image for the last 20 years, I'm like, that's Bill Stout's design right there. That's Bill Stout's Godzilla for his failed Fred Decker. I'm like, that is the spitting image of this thing brought to life. I'm like, get the hell out of here with this. And then on top of that, you get one of the most violent scenes in any Godzilla movie I've ever seen, because the Godzilla source comes in and like it is, again, like the Spielberg parables are thick in this movie. Like this is the Jurassic Park moment. This is the T-Rex and the Jeep scene, except there's a bunch of Japanese soldiers hiding, and it's why am I blank? I got his name right here. The main character. Why am I blanking on his damn name? Sorry, it's been a long week for me. Yes. So when they're sitting there, and I'm finally watching the sub version, and they're like, "What the hell is that?" And one of the soldiers says, "That's got to be Godzilla." And like, what? And they're like, "It's what the local natives call it." Tying it into the first movie, still keeping the lore of like Godzilla was this creature off Odo Island. The locals talked about it in legend. They're like, we didn't think it was real. The natives would say that, yeah, this thing comes ashore every once in a while, and that it's something to watch out for. But I didn't expect to see this 20-foot dinosaur Godzilla. And when they tell him, like, go get in the plane, because our guns aren't going to do crap to this thing, and when it gets in front, unload into this thing and kill it. And there's that moment where he hesitates.
Yeah.
And this was the beauty of really hammering down the survivor's guilt that is the ongoing theme in this movie.
He fails a second time.
He fails a second time to save his fellow servicemen.
Yeah.
And they all, now to be fair, they kind of bring it upon themselves, because they have that moment of like, they're so freaked out that they ignore their superiors, orders, and they just start opening fire. And then you watch this Godzillasaurus just tear into these guys. When the one soldier gets snapped in the mouth and tossed in the air, I lost my mind. I'm like, they are not screwing around. They are not messing around. And you just watch. By the way, this looked like it looked like they shot this on location, which added so much more depth. Like this movie does not look like any other Japanese Godzilla movie ever made. And it does help that Yamazaki shot a lot of stuff on location. Like clearly, like Ginza and all that is all digitally recreated.
Yeah.
But like the boat stuff, the Odo Island, it all looked like it's clearly a location shoot, which just adds so much more realism and so much more depth to these scenes of carnage. And by the way, you're like legit for the first time seeing Godzilla just straight up murder people. Like it's not in a gory fashion, but he's murdering people. Like it's something that for years Toho was like, no, you can't show. You know, it was always the joke Godzilla would step on people, but you never really saw it. I think the closest we ever got to it was in 1984 in the Return of Godzilla when the transient's running and Godzilla's like right behind him and you just see the foot come down. But even then, they don't show him getting stepped on. Here, the Godzilla source is just smashing guys into the ground. Like you see them get plopped into the ground and it pushed in. Guys are getting tossed left and right. And then he flips the plane and explodes. And when he comes to the next morning, it's just the mechanic who's just berating him. He's like, "This is on you. All these men are dead, and it's all your fault." And like, just pretty much calls him a coward. It's like, "You're a coward." Like, he's like, "I know you completely lied about your plane because you're a coward, and now your cowardice got everyone killed. I hope you're happy." In that moment when they're on the boat coming back, that random soldier just gives him that envelope, and he opens it up, and you kind of just you see
Yeah.
something, and he's like freaks
Yeah.
out and shoves it into his pocket. Like that thread, like that. It's this is the first time I've truly seen like PTSD, like truly like without being overtly like dramatized in a way of like, oh, you're just turning it up. Like, no, the nuance that it was done throughout this movie, it was absolutely perfect. Like
Yeah.
his journey back home, finding out his parents are dead. Tokyo is in complete ruins from the firebombing. His house is essentially just a burnout shack, and his life immediately turns around when he meets this girl, and she shoves this baby into his arms, and she takes off because she was caught stealing something, and he ends up taking her in like a stray cat, and as much as he's saying like you're here tonight and you're gone tomorrow, and the next thing you know, it's been 3 months and they're still there, and then 6 months and they're still there, and then a whole year later, like they're still living together, and you can see like he's still racked with guilt, but like for some reason, like as much as she's given him, some grief, you can tell that they have quietly, unofficially formed this family without calling themselves a family. Like neither of them want to admit it yet, but they're just kind of like they're just giving themselves the excuse. We're just surviving. That's all it is. But as it goes on, and he gets the job on the boat as the minesweeper, which again, like going into like, oh, like you cannot escape your fate. Like you are still tied to this war, and you are haunted by this monster that honestly, there's only one other dude that saw this thing, and no one's talked about it. Like you can go on about it. Like that moment when he's confessing is like, I 2 years ago, this he's like it literally says a dinosaur attacked me and this group of soldiers on this island, and because of me not hesitating to pull the trigger, they're all dead, and I'm haunted by them. He's like, maybe I'm dead, maybe I'm in hell, maybe this is my penance. Again, the movie nerd in me was just like, I've seen this before. This was if you know your horror, there's a movie called Tales from the Dark Side, and it's an anthology film, and the third story is this guy that runs into a gargoyle in the middle of an alley one night, and the gargoyle kills this transient, and he sees the gargoyle kill this transient. The gargoyle catches him and says, "You're to swear. I'll let you live, but you're to swear never to tell anyone what you saw here." And the whole story is him keeping the secret. Like his life starts getting good, but he can't keep the secret. And he ends up telling his wife, who turns out to be the gargoyle, and thus inflicting a curse. And his wife and his kids turn into these gargoyle creatures, and he ends up dying at their hands because he was racked with some guilt that he couldn't, keep the swear. I'm like, this is like right out of that, except no one's turning into a gargoyle, and he was attacked by a dinosaur. So again, just like these little things that I was picking up on. Um,
Yeah, I
but
like the fact that you were saying this is a very violent Godzilla, but to
mhm.
go back, I like the fact that Godzilla's source, he never eats anyone. He
Mm,
just chomps them and throws them in the air.
yes,
And I'm not gonna lie, I laughed pretty hard in the
hmm
theater. I mean, I was trying not to laugh too loud because Japanese
hmm
culture in the theater is very quiet.
hmm
But I don't know why. I thought that was hilarious because he literally was just upset and didn't want you there, but he
yeah,
didn't need to eat you. He
no,
just wanted you out of the way.
yes,
Um, and to move forward when you were saying, I like the fact that he was like, maybe this is hell, maybe this is penance, and then he tried to live a good life
hmm
and it came back around anyways, and he goes, "Just I knew I couldn't be happy." Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? There was a lot of
hmm
that survivor's guilt, and I like the fact that when he was a minesweeper, like you were saying,
hmm
he's actually a good shot
hmm
because you've never actually seen him do his military position, his work,
yeah,
his, kamikaze. So he could be a terrible shot for all we know, and he just didn't wanna and he turns out to be really good. He's
yes,
actually really good at his aim, and he's very good at shooting. He just has moments where he can't do it, when it
yeah.
just triggers, you
It's
know?
that it's that when it's that thing of like when the time comes down, are you prepared to do what you were trained to do? And he hesitated on two different occasions back to back, and
Yeah.
it bit
Oh,
him in the ass big time.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, because it goes deeper. The fact that had he actually gone through, he would have died. Had he maybe gone somewhere else, he might, that never would have happened to him, and like his life could have gone a whole nother path. But it was just the circumstances of like, I am bailing on this mission. We're losing the war. There's no point in me killing myself, and because of because of where I was, I happened to be in this event of a dinosaur attacking and murdering my fellow soldiers, and I could have done something about it, and I didn't. So it's the minesweep stuff felt like, okay, this is, I can, I'm now being paid to rectify some of the errors of the war, and I can use my talents that I was trained with to make some money, do some good. And then his past comes back to haunt him in like a literally in a big bad way. Um, let's talk about the boat,
The
because
boat.
the crew on this boat, my God, not since the SS Minnow have I been enamored with such a scurvy band of scallywags as this. Like, everyone on this boat is just like, they like, again, you get only about, I would say about what, 15 minutes through a montage. Excuse me, through a montage and some stuff at home, like them bonding. But like, again, the characters are the actors are doing such a damn good job of like, by the midway through the montage, as they show the years moving, and they show the bomb going off in the Bikini Atoll, and then you see Godzilla start to mutate.
His eye, yeah.
Yeah, his eye, like everything start like coming up. But meanwhile, he's out there smiling as he and his buddies are just blasting the crap out of mines on this pile of crap boat, because they need a wooden boat because the American mines are magnetic to take out, the larger cruisers. So they're like, this is the only way. Like, it's kind of, again, a little
You
a
would
little
have
bit
missed
of
it
like,
if there was no English subtitles.
that's
You would
again
have missed it. You
one
would
of
have
those
just
things.
thought they were on a crap boat.
Yeah, one of those things I absolutely missed. And it was like, this is where the details were needed on an exceptional level, because again, these are the things I miss. I'm like, oh, this is why they're on such a crappy boat. Yes, because they're mine sweeping, and some of the mines are magnetic, so they don't want to accidentally blow up in the middle of the ocean. So
Yeah.
um So yeah, so and of all the characters that I was completely not, Doc, the aptly named Doc. That guy, like the second he shows up, like on screen, like this guy just draws all the attention to him. Like he looks like this big ball of joy. Like he's kind of like enjoying what he's doing. And again, lost in the translation. Did not know in the first viewing that yes, he was a former naval weapons designer for the Japanese Navy. And so this is part of his gig is like, well, I got to clean up the mess I made. But as he even comes off, he's like, look, we were all doing our jobs. I didn't exactly agree with what we were doing, but I had to do my job, and now it is my job to clean up this mess. And that's exactly what we're doing. Like he lets off. He's a smarter man than he lets on, and that's again one of the just charming little features of Doc. Because again, later on he would go on to play just a gigantic, crucial role in this movie. But um, when I saw Doc come up, I'm like, that hair.
He's
There's
a
a little bit of
scientist. They
he's a
all were, when you
scientist.
saw him, you knew he was a scientist.
Oh, easily because he's got what I call the Doc Brown aesthetic. Just the kind of like the kind of wavy, unkempt hair, a little bit of like the kind of happy-go-lucky attitude. Even though, and he's clearly smart as a tack, but keeps things close to the vest. Um,
All the
it was
characters were great because even the kid character could have been annoying,
oh
and
yeah,
he
it
was
was
useful at the end.
very much. Oh, everyone got a redemption arc. Everyone got a redemption arc. Like again, that is the stroke of great writing because even the side characters got their moments to shine. Like because there's a lot of times side characters are just there for plot points and to kind of move things along. No, everybody had their arc, as little or as big as it was, and it all played out masterfully. Um, so the initial Godzilla attacks, like the idea of like, okay, so there's something big, there's something attacking ships, it's moving towards Tokyo, it's moving towards Japan, and these poor bastards are given the uneventful job or the unfortunate job of, hey, go find this thing and try to kill it if you can. And once they realize what it is, like then the PTSD flash. He's like, no, you don't understand. This thing killed. I watched it just murder everyone. Like, guns didn't like this. The gun we have here is not going to do the job. So, excuse me. Which is where we get Doc kind of landing. He's like, yeah, we kind of know that. Like, that's why we got to go pick up some mines and we're going to go blow this thing out of the water. Like, and then it turns into Jaws for me in the best way. Like the Jaws references at the end of the first act of this movie are just it's painted, but not in a way if you're like, yeah, I've seen this, but I've seen it done better. No. This is clearly the Jaws homage without being too on the nose and just too hackneyed to like, okay, a lesser director would have really fumbled this, but
Yeah.
it came out so damn well because once Godzilla does show up and they realize, oh, he's a lot bigger than we anticipated him to be. Because when I watched this originally in Japanese, I'm like, how? Like they're in this. Why are they in this little ass boat trying to run from Godzilla, who's clearly swimming as fast as they are? And the translation does make a world of difference. It's like no, like they're given the job to like, okay, we got to blow them up. Their second, their partner boat is the first one to get completely ganked by Godzilla in a beautiful sequence where he just rushes out of the water and just slams this boat down and completely obliterates it. So as he's like taking care of that, like they're like, you got to book it. And this is also the first time I think I've ever seen Godzilla actually properly swim in a Japanese movie. Because a lot of times, It's the guy in the suit. They're in the pool. Either they had Godzilla like kind of like he does this splash thing where they kind of replicate him. It looks like he's supposed to be swimming, but it's just the suit going up and down like a paddle motion. The Heisei films kind of gave us the model under supposed to look like he's swimming underwater. Even the legendary movies, they kind of fall into this trap a little bit of, especially the 2019 film when Godzilla rises out of the water after he just absorbed the bomb, and you're sitting there like it's about 700 feet of ocean that he's floating up, but he's somehow standing completely upright in, which it's supposed to look, I know it's
Yeah.
meant to, be a cool looking scene, but the physics of this don't make any sense. Here, the physics played out beautifully. Like Yamazaki was paying attention to everything. Like the fact that Godzilla's swimming with just like the top of his head up, and you just see the spines, the way he moves he moves like in a marine iguana. Just those little tidbits. When they launched that first mine into his mouth, and they blow it up, and you see like half of his face just completely like blown. I'm like, again, like this movie's not playing around. I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen that amount of actual like gore and damage done to like it was like right out of a Gamera movie. That's how like
Yeah.
visceral it got. Like you
Violent.
can
Yeah.
see like chunks like hanging out, and then all of a sudden like he just starts regenerating, which again, the little things that it's what I love about what the legendary movies have done, where they take all these little things over the years that the Showa films and the Heisei films have added to like Godzilla's repertoire of powers and his abilities, and I mean Godzilla 2000 literally spent one whole damn movie explaining like, yeah, he's like Wolverine, he can regenerate. We're going to build a whole movie around this, which I always was like, what? Like to this day, that story still boggles my mind. But like, yeah, we can play with this bit of lore. We're not adding anything to it, but we're just going to go a little deeper on it. That he has a healing factor. Like this is what the mutation did to him, and his face just completely regenerates. But it's not perfect. Like there's that scar that goes right across. Like it's all discolored and everything, and he's just pissed off. And the moment that they're like, we're screwed, that battleship shows up, and you see all the sailors, just a beautiful sweeping shot of like everyone just looking like that's a giant dinosaur that's in the ocean right now. Like, what the hell are we looking at? And when they open fire on him, like it just the impact of like the shelling on him, like you just see like him turn, just like you didn't just do that. That whole attack sequence, that was the moment when I was watching this in the Japanese theater. I'm like, this holds up to any American movie I've watched in the last 15 to 20 years. Like that sequence alone was so beautifully done when he rears up out of the water. And it's not like he just, it's, kind of like an animal. He leans up, he jumps on top as much as he can of the carrier and just starts tearing away at it, just viscerally like an animal, and then slides back down. Like any other, like any other time in the past, that would have just been like a model, and Godzilla just would have been doing like blah, blah, like this. But just seeing just the destruction, the scope, the scale, the shots you can get, like this of all times was like the first time that it truly felt like this is what CG can promise and deliver. And as much as I always love my suits, I'm like, if this is what you can get going forward, this is probably the direction we should be moving in. And I know it sounds blasphemous, but man, that whole moment there, and I just thought like, we just made fun of Ant-Man 8 months ago for how MODOK looked, and he looks silly and ridiculous. And that movie cost $250 million. And I know this movie did not cost anywhere near that. And that just this moment put half that movie to shame. And then we got the first atomic blast, and it
Yes.
just eviscerates the ship, which was, again, we saw that same exact scene in Godzilla versus Kong, but this one was done with just so much more oomph to it that you're like, oh, like, yeah, this movie is not playing around. Then we get to the assault on Giza.
Yes, I was
Daylight.
actually gonna say the little wooden boat reminded me of a moment where it was Captain America
Mm-hmm.
fighting Thanos,
Mm-hmm.
and never have I felt like, yes, they're here,
Yeah.
as when the ship from like Singapore, whatever was coming up, and
Mm-hmm.
that was all of Doctor Strange's portals opening
Mm-hmm.
in Infinity, no, in Endgame,
Yeah.
and everybody is coming through. Granted, that one had a much happier ending, but I've never really felt emotionally invested because, as
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows, I root for the kaijus.
Mm-hmm.
But this time I actually felt terrified for the people, and I was visibly excited, like
Mm-hmm.
emotionally excited when the large battleship came. And then when the first time, what I noticed was we saw Godzilla's powers the first time, but we
Mm-hmm.
actually saw it from underwater, meaning we
Yeah.
knew that when you see it in daytime, which there's a lot more daytime fights than the
Mm-hmm.
legendary ones, it was going to be even more impressive. But the first time we see it, we just get a taste of what it is.
Yeah.
And it was already so devastating that I actually almost just like out of my seat. I was like, "Oh no. If this is what it's like in the water, tip of
Mm-hmm.
the iceberg,
Mm-hmm.
that means when he's on land, it's gonna be just like 10 times worse."
I got two things on that. One, personal, because
Personal.
as this whole sequence was going down, and Jessica and I were in that movie theater watching this, she, as this sequence began, because I told her at the beginning of this movie, look, I am dead exhausted, but I don't want to miss this. So at any point, if you turn over and I am nodding off, you have my full permission to elbow and punch the hell out of me to make sure that I stay awake. Now, with that being said, I was fully awake because I'm like, damn. And then as this is about ready to go down, Jessica leaps out of her seat. Like, she got up and started slapping me across the chest, like going, pay attention to that. I'm like, I'm awake. I'm because, and she just started pointing at the screen like it's about to go down. I'm like, okay, something's about to happen. Um, the second thing, the beam, which we'll go a little deeper into in a minute. But I know Yamazaki said his favorite Godzilla movie, and there's a lot of borrowed inspirations from GMK. He said that's arguably one of his favorite ones. He hosted a screening of it right before Minus One premiered, and the imprints of that movie are all over this film. Like, there were such subtle nods that, like, if you're not a fan, you won't pick them up. But if you have studied these films, like Jessica and I have, and many others have, like scholars studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, you immediately recognize a lot of the things. And the blast when he shoots turns into that mushroom cloud that is
Oh,
reminiscent of the first time when Godzilla shows up in GMK, and you see him charging up, and then you just see this mushroom cloud. Now, the unfortunate problem with that is that the budget would not allow Kaneko to keep doing that every single time because he's got to fight three other monsters, and it's going to be expensive, and just the logistics of like an atomic bomb going off every time he shoots that would make things end very quickly. But it was a nice nod. Yamazaki's like, no, every time he does that, that's what's going to happen. And I will make sure that's what's going to happen, because
yeah.
not long after that, we get the assault on Giza, which, as you brought up, 90, I would say 95% of actually every scene of Godzilla, proper Godzilla, not the Godzilla source, Godzilla himself, is in utter complete daylight which blew me away. Like, I was trying to remember, like, well, no, because because the big like beam attack was at night, because it's violent and it's violent and it looks prettier at night. I can't remember the last time a Japanese Godzilla movie was like 95% done in the day. Like, I was trying to go back in my head. I'm just going back as far as I could. I'm like, Final Wars didn't do it. Like, I think no, even the final battles in both the Mechagodzilla movies were at night. Like, and there was only one daylight battle in GMK. Like, Mega Gearus was the last time they had a full daylight battle. So going almost 20 years now, outside of the legendary movies, was the last time a Japanese Godzilla movie had anything like this just go on in the daylight, which I found so refreshing, because that is, and not only that, but I do believe, because there, when that assault goes down, it is one giant homage to the original films, like for Godzilla's first main assault on Tokyo, and that one is done all completely at night. So it would only make sense. It's like, okay, if we're going to do that, let's add a twist to it. This is daylight, but it just, there's always something, like when you're seeing terror done in like bright daylight, it just adds this sense of dread that you cannot like, this feels even deeper than when you're doing it at night, because at night there's atmosphere to it, but when you're seeing like vast destruction as the sun is just shining down on you, it's supposed to be the part of the day where you feel at your best and everyone's up and about, and then just utter destruction happens. That's always so much more impactful to me. I think it's just because most filmmakers just, they go for the low hanging fruit of like, now darkness, and because also we can hide some things, we can hide some effects. Yamazaki's like, no, 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 you're going to see every detail. Like, there was Jim Cameron level of detail in the digital destruction that I saw. And again, I'm going to hammer this several times during this whole podcast. This destruction scene looked as good as anything Hollywood has done in the last 15 years. Like, I will put dimes to dollars to, there are times, like when I watched Avatar 2, about 20 minutes in that movie, I'm like, those do not look like digital. They look like people in costumes. That's how good the digital effects were. But that movie also cost $500 million. But at the other end of the spectrum, all the wacky nonsense that Cameron put in there, like the big, the sentient whale that helps them out halfway through the film, I'm like, that looks a little rough at times. And I get it. You can only make something that's that fantastical, only looks so real. Godzilla looks like he's there. Like, the people are actually, like, the streets are buckling under his feet as people are running. When you see his foot come down, like, and they get stomped, like, it feels like everyone, like, that is all happening. That at no point was any uncanny valley really hit me, and like, I'm like, yeah, that looks fake. I'm like, no, this is astonishing.
And I love the fact that he looked like, just to compare it to the newest ones, which is Godzilla,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is legendary, excuse
Yeah,
me. It looked like when Godzilla's walking, the buildings happen to be in his way.
yeah,
They were like more of
a nuisance.
bystanders,
Yeah,
that innocent bystanders that got taken out. Unless
mm-hmm.
he's obviously fighting, then the buildings go down, right?
Yeah.
This was
Like
a
when the
Godzilla that said, screw your buildings. I don't like
mm-hmm,
your roads. I don't like your people. I don't like your
mm-hmm,
trains. And
mm-hmm.
he was just destroying everything because he didn't like anything that he saw. He
Yes.
was actively going through the building and the town,
Mm-hmm.
which I found
It's
I liked it.
There's a meme that someone put together of like various like clips from Godzilla, like the 90s and 2000s Godzilla movies, of just him going through buildings. It says, screw this building, screw that building. It's like just him kicking it. This building in particular, that's what that whole thing felt like. And then they did add like it, once the tanks and stuff start opening fire on him, and he just start getting madder and just started just flailing about. The again, the attention to detail. So when he's in the water, he's moving like a marine iguana. Like you can see it, like he's fast, he's fluid. But when he comes on the land, like this is what kind of didn't hit me the first time until I actually went and did the ride and noticed how Godzilla walked in that in comparison to how Minus One walks. But the second time around, yeah, the weird tank movement, like just like this. And the first time I saw it, it was a little jarring. I'm like, oh, okay. Because all the previews show him like there's points where he's like spinning around and like he looks like he's moving kind of fast, but the wide shots of him like moving, he's just this
And his belly down here is
yeah,
like
like undulating as he's moving. But it was the second time around. I'm like, no, this actually makes sense because this is probably the first time he's on land since he's mutated and he's grown. Now he has all this mass that he has to carry around. It would not make sense for him to be, sauntering about like just because even the original 54 one, he moved slow and methodically. And I think that was just an aesthetic choice because poor Nakajima in that 200-pound suit. It's like you can only go so far. So this did feel much more on the second viewing. I'm like, okay, this was an aesthetic choice, and it does make sense when considering it. Like this is his first time truly coming on land, and you're considering like the amount, like the size and the mass. Like he's learning to literally walk again. Like he's not like gone are all the dinosaur esque features. Like because when he's the Godzilla source, he's got like the T-Rex legs with the bent knees and everything. Now he's standing up. He has a more human posture, and he's having to learn to walk like he's having to learn to walk in a new way, and he's carrying all this mass with him. And the only time that like he's fluid is like when he's just throwing his momentum, like when the tail is just tearing through the buildings and you just see all this rubble flying through. The subtle, again, the beautiful nod, the train biting sequence, absolutely love that. And I feel like I just watched this done with the last Mission Impossible movie because there's a whole train sequence where everyone's dangling from a train over a cliffside. But this one didn't wear out its welcome like the Mission Impossible movie did, and it really did feel like there was definitely more stakes in it. But I love the fact that he's just carrying that train around like kind of like a dog with like a bone in his mouth, and like part of the car, like the secondary car, is just dangling. And he's just like, huh, and just tosses it like it's nothing. I also love that things just get tossed. There are so many things just being tossed in this movie. Like Yamazaki loves
the
tossing
train
large
toss.
objects.
You know he's coming when you see an object fly across the screen.
Yes, I love that. Yes, the kind of like the heralding of his arrival is some a train car, a piece of building, a whole damn ship getting thrown 150 300 feet from where it was picked up, like a tornado tossing a trailer. That the reporters on the roof, I'm sitting there, I'm like, that's a great callback to the reporters on Tokyo Tower, except this time they're on top of oh god, I forgot the name of the building. But as they're unloading on him, and he just clips the side with his tail, and you just fall. The camera just follows these poor guys as they're falling to their death as the building crumbles. I'm like, that is such a gorgeous shot. And again, just hammering down like, no, this is not it's neither a heroic Godzilla, nor is he like legitimately evil. This is this is the first time I feel like Toho really just made like a animalistic Godzilla. Like he is just this thing. He's angry because he just got half his face blown up. He's been horrifically mutated by nuclear energy, and pretty much he's just mad at everything. It's as if someone had put a lion in a cage, didn't feed him for 2 weeks, and then just kept hammering the bars, like, and teasing him, and then like, okay, we're gonna open the cage, and then let's see what this thing does. Yeah, it's gonna be mad and attack anything that comes in its way. Um,
Can you
but then,
imagine though, from his point of view, he's just living his life on his island,
mm-hmm,
doing his thing, and then
mm-hmm,
you come along onto his island and he wants to protect his territory. Then one day he's just swimming in the ocean, doing his thing, and then he gets exploded at, and now he's
yep,
got a big old body,
mm-hmm,
and I'm sure mutating hurts. I
mm-hmm,
don't think it's gonna feel good. It's maybe like an Animorphs
mm-hmm,
situation, you know? And now he's big and he said, I know who's responsible and I hate
yeah,
all of you.
yes, like it without losing, because that's the thing. I have seen some people like any criticism of this movie is that if there are some people that, this is the argument people have been making about the legendary films, that they've moved away from the atomic bomb metaphor. I would argue, in as much in this movie, like, he's not as much, he's not as much as the atomic bomb metaphor as he was in the first movie. Like, this is because of the personal story. This doesn't come across as heavy-handed as the original movie. Like, yes, the metaphor is still in there, but it's in a different context. Like, this is more or less, how do I put this? Like, this just feels like the universe is crapping on Japan once again. Like, it's not even so much like this is, what the horrors of atomic energy will do. This is just, for some reason, like, screw this place, in particular, kind of thing. Like, it plays into the idea of like the minus one, names. Like, we just literally got firebombed. Japan got set back to zero. As we're rebuilding, it'd be like I just survived a heart attack and I got in my car, leaving the hospital, and I got sideswiped by a Jeep running a red light. Like, yeah. And I survived it, but now I gotta go back into the damn hospital because now I have to have my collarbone pop back in. So that more or less, that is, that's what came across more, because at no point, very rare military intervention in this movie. And again, Yamazaki did a great job of explaining why the Japanese military couldn't do their thing, why the American military couldn't really intervene. And just watching Godzilla just trample on the public at all points. It's just people going about their lives, and then on this particular day they got caught up in just some series of unfortunate events. And the moment when he charges up the beam for the first time, and the spikes start popping out, which I thought was a great, again, I don't mind adding new things if you're going to do new alliterations. It's kind of the reason why I love Shin, because Ano and Higuchi just went, what if he shot, the beams out of his back? I'm pretty sure that's, I drew that as a kid. I'm pretty sure they came up, they thought it's like, well, it comes out of his mouth. Why couldn't it come out of his spine? It's like, obviously they glow every time. Let's just turn that into like part of the weapon. So adding these little tidbits, I'm always down for.
And the way they
Um,
shot it, the way Yamazaki shoots it, and the point
mhm,
of view when you see the spines pop up, that's when
mhm.
you're like, oh
Yeah,
crap.
it's this sense of dread, like building, because you know what's coming. You know exactly what's going. Aesthetically, like, I still like my Godzilla to have his spines a different color than the rest of his body. It's my one quip with the legendary design up to this point, is that he's all one solid color. Um, this one did the same thing. The spines are the same color as the rest of his body, and except when he starts charging up, then they turn the classic blue. Um, I did see someone point out that it's supposed to be, they're supposed to replicate like when an atomic or like when a nuclear reactor goes on, the rods start popping up, like that idea. But it also feels like when you cock, because especially the way when he finally releases the beam, it's almost like the hammer on a revolver. Like when you pull it back, like the way they all go up, and then when he does the rear back, and you can see him like kind of inhale, and the energy start like like shining out. They go down, and he shoots, and like it feels like a gun that goes off, like a revolver. Like you got to let the hammer go down, and then the bullet comes out, and that shot of like the beam just tearing across like 5 miles of real estate and causing a nuclear level explosion. That again, the attention to detail, the just the shockwave, and then the
Blast.
pressure, the
Yep.
pressure equalizing, beautifully done. And that's when we see again, sorry, it's a little late and it's been a long week for me. I'm
Is it
blanking on
when
her name.
Noriko pushes Koichi out of the way?
And then she
And
just
she
gets
flies?
sucked right off into the debris. And when he comes out, like, and he has that moment of like, just, I'm being punished. I'm being punished by the universe. And he starts, crying as you see like the black rain come down, and he's just looking as Godzilla's just standing there, roaring angrily as this mushroom cloud is in the distance. Like, beautifully done. Like, it just really hammering home that like this poor guy cannot catch a break. And by the way, this is only halfway through the movie. Like the first half of this movie moves at such a breakneck pace. Like upon second viewing, I'm like, oh yeah, they're already there. Like I could have, again, but watching it, with one bloodshot eye open the first time around, and in, without any of the translation, I completely like this is a 2 hour movie. The main thing I just remembered was that middle part. There's a lot of talking going on, but when we moved into that portion, like watching it this time with the translation, so much more in depth. Like just the struggle of everyone, the fact that it's not a military operation. The people themselves
Are
have to
from
band
the
together.
military background, though.
They
They are
have military
from.
background, but this is not an official like they make it adamantly clear. This is not an official military operation because we can't, they can't get involved. The people have to deal with this giant monster on their own, and so they band together. Like, okay, we just lost a lot of citizens. There's this giant monster out in the bay. He will be back. We have to figure out how to fix this problem because no one else is going to fix it for us. The government's not going to
Right.
fix it.
Right.
No one else. We have to do it. And that rallying of like here's the plan. I remember watching when I was watching it without it, and he pulls the curtain up, and you see Godzilla in the water. There's a part of me like, are they really going to do like a take on the oxygen destroyer? Because I just saw bubbles and stuff. I'm like, and then when he sank, and I saw I'm like, oh no, they're doing again without needing any trends. I realized, oh, they're trying to kill him with pressure. Like that was abundantly clear. I'm like, that's actually genius. Like Yamazaki really thought of a great way to like, okay, how would people with limited resources deal with a, you know, you know, was he like 150, 150 feet, 150-foot monster that can regenerate and shoot a beam death at, a beam of death at anybody. But when Doc
Plan
is
was
explaining,
insane, but I was on board. And what
yes,
made me laugh was the little wooden Godzilla toy that they
yeah.
used to sink him.
And by the way, I do love the fact that like you see serious Doc and he's explaining the whole thing, and everyone's like, "Is this going to work?" He's like, "Yes, but I can't guarantee it." Like he's like, in theory, like the math is there,
The math checks
the
out.
math checks out, but I cannot promise that a 100% guarantee. Like I can promise you 80%, but that 20% is still pretty big. And if you're going to go out there and we're going to do this, like lives will be put on the line. And again, a great moment when they're like, look, you're not being forced to do this. If any of you don't want to do this, no shame, go home. And like 10 dudes are like, hey, I got a family. We just went through a war. I'm
Yeah.
not doing this again. And when they're like, look, good luck, but I'm not putting my neck out again, for this stuff. It again, another great moment of like, again, the humanity aspect of this. It's like
Yes.
there's just such realism being hammered down. Like I stuff like that, I was absolutely in love with in this film. And then when they even ask us, like, okay, so if the pressure doesn't kill him, what then? And he's like, well, I thought of that. So if the crushing pressure doesn't kill him, we're going to shoot him right back up, kind of like a deep sea fish when they bloat. And then the pressure change, that should kill him. I'm like, it's pressure one way, it's pressure the other way. I'm like, this is still like such a wacky but believable, plan. I'm like, I believe that these guys could pull it off. I'm like, this is ingenious way. Like every other aspect of any Godzilla movie is the military coming up with either some super weapon or another monster, but this time it's just the people with what limited resources they have banding together and figuring out how are we going to deal with this new threat. That is where this movie completely won me over. At this point, I'm like, this movie is absolutely it's nearly perfect in my opinion. But then we get the added aspect of like, well, how do we make sure Godzilla's in the spot that he needs to be? And that's when our reluctant hero says, I'll do it. I can get in a plane and I can lure him. Problem is, there's no planes. So they ended up finding one, which was this, I forgot, I'm blanking on the name. This experimental plane that Japan had used. I remember seeing this thing. I'm like, man, that's actually an awesome design.
They
But the problem
also
is,
used his own roar against him to make
yes,
him feel like that there was a territorial battle. So
yes,
when they were like putting it in the water, his own roar, just
mm-hmm.
during that sound machine, I was like,
Yeah, like the fact Godzilla doesn't recognize his own voice. He's like, hey, there's some dick that sounds like me out there. Like, no, we're not doing this. Which, it still falls into lore. Because officially, there's always been two Godzillas. The first one was killed, and then the second one is the one we follow all the adventures of. So again, it's not like Yamakaze's stepping on anything. He's diligently playing with the lore that was put out there, and I do love the fact that they treat him like he's like an animal. He's not, he's just this animal that is kind of a slight against God, but we have to deal with it. So let's play into the biological aspects. It's like, well, he's territorial. He considers Tokyo part of his territory now, and whenever he's going to come back, it's always going to be a bad time for everybody. So we got to deal with this before he decides he wants to come back and hang out for a little bit. So they figure, I think they got like 8 days or something like that before they figure he makes a turnaround and comes back. So
I love how nothing goes as planned and he arrives early.
Of course, because that's the only way it works. That's the only way it works. And our hero realizing, okay, this is my redemption arc. Like, the girl I did not want to admit that I loved died right in front of me once again because of, he's blaming himself for all of this. He's like, I could have stopped this years ago if I had just did not hesitate and pulled the trigger on those guns. And now it's come back to bite him. And like the Survivors Guild's getting him to the point he's now quietly suicidal. And
he lures out the mechanic by angering him.
Oh, brilliant way. Like just talking mad. He's like, I know a guy. And he's doing everything he can to find him. And he's like, they're like, look, we can get you like Here's the last couple of known addresses. So all he does, he turns into a 1940s version of an internet troll and sends all of this mad crap talking letters to this dude
Oh,
who beats him over the head with like a club when he sees him. And the whole moment of like, hey, you're alive. It's like, what the hell is this? It's like, I need your help. Go to hell if you think I'm helping you. He's like, no, no, no. You saw the big dinosaur thing, right? We got a plan. But we need someone who can fix a plane.
and the
And
war's
this,
not over. And
yes,
the war is not over. And that's
the
what's
the
important to soldiers is to end the war.
yes, to him, the war's not over. To a lot of these guys, the war is not over. And this does represent like the arc of like I'm now so depressed that I'm now contemplating doing the thing that I chickened out on originally. That now I'm willing to go on a suicide run because me not doing it in the first place led to all this. Like again, just this beautiful arc. And the mechanic sees it on him. He's like, "Are you planning to do what I think you're going to do?" And at first you're like, "Is he going to let him do what we think he's going to do?" But there's a beautiful little PS to that. But we get to the plan. And again, I one of the things that when they're on the water and they ask us like, well, we got to contend with his Godzilla's ray of death, and Doc explains he's like, well, the thing is he can't use it nonstop. Like he has to recharge it. So if we can get him to either use it once and we'll make this decoy. We'll have a decoy ship. He'll use it, and then that gives us a window of time before it recharges that we can do all this and get away like safe. He's like, I calculate all this. Like we've studied this. We've studied from what we've seen, what we studied of him. Like we got like a window of like maybe like 10 to 12 minutes to sink his ass to the bottom of the ocean. And if he doesn't die there, he'll die when he comes up. So little details like that I absolutely loved. Get the plane going. Godzilla shows up early again by tossing a ship like 4 miles inland. You just see this thing like it felt like it's like in Pacific Rim when Gypsy's walking with the tanker to beat Otachi over the head with. When he knocks out his engine, goes flying, like stuff like that. This ending battle on the second excuse me second viewing, it just hit so much harder. The fact that he's leaving the note for their neighbor, take care of his daughter, that she's realizing like, oh crap, this guy's, after we kind of, after she gave him grief for not doing what he did, but then kind of like reneging on that and like going like, no, like you kind of were right to do what you did. And now she's like, no, you're not going to finally do the thing you were supposed to do, but now we don't want you to do because you're just so stricken with grief and you feel like you have to rectify something. So he gets in the plane.
Because every
Beautiful
time
scene.
someone tells him, make sure you don't die and don't do anything stupid, he never
Mhm.
answers.
No, no. And that
Never answers.
whole build, eloquently paid off because once he gets in that plane, you can see like his confidence come back. Like he's no longer this scared, almost like this scared boy. Like he in a way kind of regains like, and again hesitant to say, but like he kind of regains like his manhood in a way. Like he regains the confidence that he had before this whole incident, like because now he has purpose. Like he as he says, he's ending the war and lures Godzilla back out into the ocean. They get Godzilla to blast the decoy ship, and then these two battleships are in like circling around Godzilla, trapping him in what is essentially a pool net, and then dropping him to the bottom of the ocean, which I think they said was like 1,500 feet or something like that. Like it's pretty crushing. And then when they realize he starts yanking the ship again, back again to the Jaws references, when the ships start getting yanked back, and they're like, crap, he's still alive. All right, shoot him back up. And you see him, like, you can see like the depth gauge go up, and then it stops, and then you see the rafts come. They're like, that clever bastard. Like, it's gonna be harder than we thought. And when Godzilla finally, like, then we get the moment of like Kid coming with all the tugboats to help them yank Godzilla out. You're just like, this, yeah, that's the Avengers moment when they're all
Oh,
coming
when
through
they
the
all come
portal.
out through Doctor
Yes,
Strange's portals.
yes. And then they hoist Godzilla out, and he's falling apart. Like, the chunks of him are coming off, but he starts recharging, like, his blast. Like, the plan didn't exactly work. Like, he's hurt, and like
Yeah.
he can't heal as fast as he's injured. And he starts charging the blast, and you see that moment of like Doc on the ship, and everything. He's like, well, I guess that's it. And then we get the moment of the plane just zooming across. Again, it felt like right out of nowhere.
Silence
Like,
too. There's no sound in the film.
it's like that
And
scene at
time
the end of,
stops. And time
yes, it's
stops.
like that like at the end of Dunkirk, when you see the plane as it's ran out of fuel, just zooming across the beach. There's no sound. You just see it glide, and it's just as like time stops, and we get the flash, back of like the mechanic saying, "Okay, took out the guns, took out all this, put a bomb here, bomb there," and kind of telling him is like, "So are you doing what I think you're doing?" And we get the maybe I am, and there's that cutaway for a second, and you see the plane go right into Godzilla's mouth, and just this massive explosion. And it got, as the smoke clears, the top of his damn head is gone. Like, it is off. I never thought I'd see the day of that much, like that kind of visceral, like, gore ever done in a Japanese Godzilla movie. I'm like, this movie's got some balls on it. And then we get the Spielberg moment. There's the parachute. And what we find out the last second was that the mechanic was like,
And
no.
there's hints of it too, that he puts
Yeah.
an ejector seat in it.
Because then they cut away. He's like, here's the thing that none of the kamikaze planes had an ejector seat. When you're ready, you hit that, and he tells him, you better hit that. I didn't put that there just for the sake of it. And like, if you're gonna do what I think you're gonna do, you hit that thing after you activate the bombs. And when you hear them on the radio, he's listening to the radio, and they're like, we see the parachute. He's like, did it. He did it. We get this beautiful moment at, like, Godzilla sinks the bomb. He just falls apart. Like, again, a callback to GMK. Like, the energy is like shooting out of him, and he just crumbles into this helix mass that starts floating to the bottom of the ocean. Comes back, and our hero gets a letter, and he runs, and we're at a hospital, and lo and behold, his beloved is still alive, which is, when I initially watched it, I went, BS. There is no goddamn way in hell she survived that force of, like, just the force itself would have obliterated her. Like, just, let's be honest, like, there are some, like, physics were not completely taken in, but when you see the little black marks start growing on her neck, you're like, oh, okay, so there is an explanation to this. Like, there's something else more. Like, that it's our inception moment of like, well, maybe Godzilla's not dead, because immediately right after that, as you see the mass sinking to the bottom, and you see what looks like his heart, it just starts growing and mutating, and then credits.
Her being alive was like the second beat for some people, the second BS moment. The first time was when Koichi is able to find Noriko in Ginza during the Seiko Tower destruction mess situation. I was like,
just shows up.
Way you could find this woman in a crowd of running, screaming folks.
Yeah, but the movie's so good.
Called for it.
Yeah, like, there's clearly something cut for time, but the story's so like everything's so good. Again, it's one of those leaps of logic you're willing to take just because everything
Yeah.
else is that damn good.
Yeah.
Um,
And she was great, and I think that she's a character that should also be talked about because she
mhm,
went out too fast, even though she was such an important part.
yes, and she's still the driving force in the second half of that movie.
She
I
is,
would,
she is. She's a very compassionate and very loving character,
mhm,
and the fact that she's smart. When the
yeah,
train was dangling from his mouth, she aimed so she fell over the water
hmm
and then got out, and the fact is, I did feel, though, the female character has the Mothra moment, like, when
hmm
she pushed him in and she got blasted, I was like, "Women be sacrificing." Like, I was like, "What is this?"
yeah,
Like, she gotta go. Where
there's a term that a lot of modern film critics they call this fridging of
Yeah.
the
Oh,
female
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
character.
yeah. From the
I
from the
I would
comics with yeah.
yes, I would not argue. I would argue this isn't exactly fridging because the fake out of her death it is detrimental in the decisions that lead to the victory. Like, and the fact of like, okay, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to leave the girl I raised as my daughter an orphan. Like, there's a lot that goes in there. So it is, I would argue that her death is still quite important to the overall arc of the story, and that her alive, and by the way, bandages, but nothing, like not a scratch on her skin, none of that. Like that's where I went bull. Like no, but when I sat down with Kazuki and he's explaining this, oh no no no, like here's the thing you miss with the cells, it's implicating that people, not just her, but a lot of people that were in Ginza that day that were caught in that blast and that attack might be infected with Godzilla cells. Like this is the unintended consequences of Godzilla, this mutated creature that exists outside of normal biology. This is the effect it will have on, the lasting effect it will have beyond the fact that it is regenerating. So it's the argument that like Godzilla's regenerative properties have infected people. Now, what that means, that's one of those things that Yamazaki has led. It's the gold glow in the briefcase. That is for you to decide. But it is, in second viewing, it does lead a little more like, okay, it's a little more believable, but it's still like she would have just been ripped apart from just the
Get out of here.
concussion
Right.
blast alone. But we're taking leaps and some bounds in a movie about a giant atomic dinosaur. So we can give a little leeway.
Also, no body, no
Mhm.
crime, no death. You can't prove anything. We never saw her body.
Never saw a body. She just got sucked away, and then that was it. Um, but overall, this is a damn good. This is not. It's not just a damn good Godzilla. This is a damn good movie in general. And like I said at the opening of this, I am beyond ecstatic that people have taken to this movie as well as it has been received. Like I know it's doing damn well in Japan, but the fact that people over here,
Mm.
they're going to a subtitled Japanese movie. Yes, it's a Godzilla movie, but I am seeing left and right people walking out like going that is a fantastic movie in its own right. Like everything top to bottom, the story, the acting, the effects, all of it. This is just a good movie. And when I saw the box office return on Monday, I was kind of blown away because look, the Beyonce concert film, came in number one. It did not do Taylor Swift numbers, but it did damn well for itself. But the upside to Beyonce's film versus Taylor Swift, Beyonce only had 3 days and then she left. And as we're recording this on Wednesday, I'm looking at the box office reports. The second that, her concert film left theaters, it wasn't like everyone's like, all right, well, let's just go watch Hunger Games. No, word of mouth pushed Godzilla to the number one spot. Like, it was number one on Monday, which has not happened for a foreign film in almost 20 years, especially a foreign film that's subtitled. So that's a big deal. In the last 3 days, it made $11 million in the two preview nights, which were only like, I think, two showings a piece. Like on Wednesday, there was the IMAX on Wednesday, there was the early showings on Thursday, and then Friday was the full day. So it came in at 11 million. Came in number 3, which is damn impressive in a time when there's kind of, there's a Disney movie out there right now. It's not doing that great, but the fact that there's a Godzilla movie that beat out an animated Disney movie, I never thought I would see the day. Never, not once. Like, even the legendary films, I would say if they went against like a Pixar movie, people are going to go see the Pixar. It's just the basic economics of like, you're taking your kids. So that's why family movies are always a better bet, because kids want to go see it. Parents got to go with the kids. So for 2 tickets, you're getting 4. But word of mouth has been exceptionally strong. And the box office reports I'm looking at right now, because the film got extended for another week. The math I'm seeing being done, that if the predictions hold as they are, there is a very strong chance that while it won't be number 1 next weekend, it could be the first movie in a national wide release that maybe dips 2%, which is unheard of in modern box office. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
if it makes $10 million and it made $11 million last weekend, that is the dream of every studio and every theater. Like, everyone's coming back, and the same amount of people are coming back to see it again, to where it makes just as much money on the second week as it does the first week. That is, I cannot hammer how nuts that is. And the fact that a Japanese Godzilla movie is doing that, just, it almost brings a tear to my eye. Like, everybody that I took my friend Jeff, he's a big Godzilla fan, and he's also a movie nut, and he's very critical of a lot of stuff that we watch. And we watched this thing in 4DX, which, by the
Ooh.
way, I've seen quite a few movies. The first movie I ever saw in 4DX was actually, no, I take that back. First movie I saw in 4DX was the 7th Fast and Furious movie. So I pick my movies in. And usually the first film I see, when I go 4DX, it's the second viewing. I don't like to do first viewings. Last time I went, I saw Top Gun Maverick, a movie I love to death. And that movie, in the 4DX theater I saw, whoever is in charge of those seats cranked that thing up and broke the knob off. Because when I'm sitting there as Maverick is doing the canyon run, my seat is leaning all the way back and trying to buck me out of it. So Jessica and I, when we watched it in Japan, I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of talking going on in this movie. I don't see how this is going to completely translate to 4DX. Oh, they made it work. And they made it work fantastically. Like, they really played the elements. When you're on the boat, those seats are
They're
swaying.
rocking, because I realized that the main battle happens in the sea, in the ocean, where
Yep.
kind of Godzilla is kind of from, which is what I
Yeah.
really liked. And I can also see why Yamazaki did the ride pre this. But I figured in 4DX you would kind of
Oh,
go
the
to the ocean.
the rocking's gentle. It's just doing its thing. Like, when you're on the boat, like when they're moving, like, it bounces with you. When Godzilla shows up in Ginza, every footstep, that seat rattles in unison with every footstep. Like, like, it's just jumping you like the entire time. The moment he shoots that beam in Ginza, I you, you can ask our friend Lenny because he hit me up yesterday because he went and watched the 4DX. I told him, I'm like, this is the nuttiest 4DX experience I've ever had. That when that beam hits, when it fires, and then the explosion hits, that seat went back, and then it did everything in its power to throw my 300-pound frame across the damn movie theater. Like there was a point I was like holding on for. I'm like, I need a seatbelt. Holy crap! Like my buddy even turned to me. He's like, "What the hell?" Like the entire theater was just like, "What just happened?" Like the seats were trying to murder us. Like it was turning into freaking a maximum
Maximum
overdrive.
speed. Yeah.
Oh, that bonkers, absolutely bonkers. So if you get a chance, go see it in 4DX because
Okay.
man, they make it worth the time. So I now I've seen it in ScreenX and 4DX, and I might take in an IMAX showing this weekend, but there is a brand new Miyazaki movie out, so I got to make some Sophie's choices. So
Is it The Boy and the Heron?
yes,
Yes.
I've not missed a single Miyazaki movie since Princess Mononoke. I've seen every one of them in theater since they came out. So, and God only knows this might be the last one, and there's no way in hell I am missing that. But that said,
A Sophie's choice situation.
yeah. Well, it's like I can go watch Godzilla again, or I can watch the new Miyazaki movie, and both of them are going to be sharing IMAX screens. I'm like, that's a lot of money right now. They're like $20 a pop. We'll see. We'll see where the day takes me. But overall, just this is such a damn good movie. I've seen people argue the best Godzilla movie. I will hear arguments for that, but I don't. I'm very rare. I'm very hard pressed that like when a something new comes in on a long running series, I sometimes I'll jump to that conclusion like, oh, this is the best one. But then there are times I'm like, no, you gotta let time cook. You gotta let time, take its place, and then you can come back in a few years and then reassess it. Truly, where does this stand in the pantheon?
Right.
But I've seen people calling it the best of the entire series, even over the original. For me, it's definitely in the top 5. I'll say that. Is it my favorite? No, but you know what? On first viewing, Shin didn't really capture me, but subsequent viewings of Shin, I've really come around to love Shin a lot. But as I told someone on Twitter, I was born a Mechagodzilla 74 lover, and I will die a Mechagodzilla 74 lover. And there's nothing so far that has changed my stance on that being my absolute favorite Godzilla movie. But I'm just happy to see people who normally would not watch these movies actively going out to seek this movie,
Yes.
watch it, and then coming out completely flabbergasted by how good a Godzilla movie can be.
Yes. Yeah.
Vindication, Jessica. Your thoughts. I'm sorry, I've been ranting for a minute.
No. I feel like if regular moviegoers or just movie lovers or people who passively go can say that they love it or that they really liked it and thought it was better than they thought, they thought it would be, is a huge testament to the film itself. It is one of my favorite Godzilla films because in the Godzilla films, there are films that I like for its moments. And then there are films that I love overall. And I feel like it's very different for me. Because I try, even if it's a bad movie, I try to find something salvageable in it. For Green Lantern, it was the scene when they say "We are the core" on Oa, because I never thought I would actually see that happen. That movie was not good overall.
No.
However, that scene really meant a lot to me because I've always ever seen it only in animation or read about it in the comics, but to actually see an entire Lantern Corps say "We are the core" and then do the oath itself is, if said right, is very powerful, or it could be said very cheesily. But when they shoot their beams in the sky, right, everything's amazing. So that movie overall was oof, but I like that moment. And there are some Godzilla films in the same way where I don't ever actively dislike it, much like Batman, better to have Godzilla than no Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
There are some films that I'm like, this is not for me, or the whole thing is mediocre, but I really, really enjoyed and loved this moment, and it really stood out to me, and it really sticks out in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then there are some films that I just like from beginning to end.
Yeah.
This one was one of those that is like beginning to end. You know,
Mm.
there's a few grievances here and there. No film's perfect, but it definitely is my top 5. My top 5, like closer to top 3,
Mm-hmm.
I would actually say, because I did enjoy Shin a lot. I really
Mm-hmm.
liked Shin a lot. This is
Mm-hmm.
still higher for Shin than me, for me. And then there
Mm.
were others that I actually, I mean, it's really hard to beat, honestly, the 1954. I am a 74 Mechagodzilla as well, but the 1954 is always the original. It's very hard to replace the original. Also, it's shot in black and white, which gives it a different nuance to it when you're
Mm-hmm.
watching it, when something's in black and white. But I feel like it is definitely top 5 for sure. So I don't know. I don't know. It's very rare for me to be so excited and to like a film and watch it multiple times in theater. This is
Mm-hmm.
one of those that I can watch multiple times in theater. Because you can have a good movie, but it's so heavy, you can't watch it again in theater. Because,
Yeah.
for example, like if you really like Oppenheimer or The Batman, the one with Robert Pattinson, Matt Reeves, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you can rewatch it again. They're just such heavy films. This one is heavy, but you can still rewatch because there's enough
Yeah.
action and thrill to it.
And being under 2 hours does help a
And
lot
being
with
under
that one
2
too.
hours,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So it was definitely one of those that is more like I was very, very happy to love it
Mm-hmm.
because the title of it needed some explanation because
Mm-hmm.
people thought Minus One was so weird. But when
Yeah.
you're already at ground zero because your country is devastated from war and
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla comes and like devastates you even further, it's like the saying of I've hit rock bottom, but I've continued digging. You know, like I've kept digging till I
Yeah.
hit rock bottom. This is like negative. So I was like, I don't know too much about this movie. I just know it's about devastation. For not knowing too much and going into the film and coming out, I thought it
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely beautiful, a great masterpiece, and it is beautifully shot. Like a lot of the scenery is gorgeous, especially out in the ocean. I really, really loved it. So I would still say, even after some thinking, it's definitely my top 5.
Yeah.
It's not one of my favorites that I could rewatch. So
I I'm so glad we got to watch this in Japan. Like this definitely it did feel special. It felt I mean technically this is the 70th anniversary movie even though it came out on the 69th anniversary, but
69,000 is a roundup, roundup.
yeah, I know Toho considers this the 70th anniversary film. I
I
know
know.
why they released it when they did because our next episode we're going to be talking about the trailer for Godzilla and Kong, which will be out probably in the summer in Japan, which will be full blown into the 70th anniversary. But this did feel worthy of that that momentous occasion. I mean, you look at the anniversary films. The 20th anniversary movie was Mechagodzilla. The 30th was Return of Godzilla. The 40th was Space Godzilla, and then the 50th was Final Wars, and I think you can consider the legendary film technically the 60th anniversary because it did come out on the 60th anniversary. But in the pantheon of actual Toho produced films, this feels worthy of that that title of like this. This is the watermark of how long this character has not only survived but thrived in pop culture. um, I'm happy. I'm happy as a pig in a pen that Toho is not they've reversed course from 20 years ago, 30 years ago. of like, look, we just consider these films, cheap. They're meant to sell toys. We'll crank them out once a year. They've backed away from that. Like, if Shin and this are any indication of like, okay, when we decide to do another live action, we will find a filmmaker that has, the talent to deliver the quality that we want, and also freeing up the filmmakers to really tell their stories. I mean, Anno and Higuchi got to tell their Godzilla. Yamazaki got to tell his Godzilla. This did not feel like, at neither of those films at all feel like mandates of like, we need to sell toys, we need to sell merchandise, so you have to do X, Y, and Z. Like, they're like, this feels so hands off. Like, here's the money, here's the character, here's, I mean, what you can do. But even Shin broke so many different like rules that felt like they were set before. Like, just even the fact that Godzilla like evolves, like, even, and by the way, the continuing of Godzilla's evolution from Shin, Singular Point, and this now, like, he's becoming a Pokemon. I think you even said it's like he's, it's like he went from Pichu to Raichu, like in this movie, went from the Godzilla source to this. Like, it's kind of feeling like that. But I'm happy that they're taking this stuff serious. Like, the company's taking this a little bit more seriously now. They're allowing I mean, neither of those films, neither Shin nor this, are cheap movies by Japanese standards. Those are still very expensive Japanese live action movies. But by American standards, they are cheap. Like, both
Yeah.
Shin and this cost between 11 and 15 million. And I've seen a lot of people, and I had this exact same thought walking out of there, like, knowing full well what that budget was before I went in. And I walked, I'm like, that looks just as good, if not better, than many Hollywood movies. And I knew that once this thing got released in America, like, that comparison was going to come up, and boy, howdy did it. And look, I know that the Japanese film industry works very differently than the American film industry. There are a lot of different things at play that, the reason why this movie cost this much, and like the Marvels cost 250 million. That said, I am happy to see there is a tad bit of shaming being pointed at in Hollywood of like, look, if Japan can crank this out at this budget, there is absolutely, positively no reason that every one of these giant blockbusters needs to cost upwards of $300 million. There is something you guys are doing wrong, and the diminishing box office is showing that you cannot outspend you can't spend that much to make money, because it's becoming a law of diminishing returns. And there's a lot. I mean, look, Gareth. Speaking of the legendary movie, Gareth Edwards just had that movie, The Creator, that came out, and it cost $80 million, and it looked better than 90% of the big studio films. Excuse me. Looked better than most of the big studio films. Now, was it thematically better? The movie has its issues, but visually, astonishing. And if it can be done on that small of a budget, there's absolutely, positively no reason that many of these giant blockbusters that are being cranked out now can be reeled back. And, I'm hoping that maybe some lessons are taken from this. Will they? Probably not, because Hollywood's going to Hollywood. They're going to do what they want to do. But this movie does really show that Japan can now hang and bang with the best of Hollywood. Like, Yamazaki, it's felt like for the last like 10, 15 years, he has been inching the Japanese film industry to be that true competitor with the American film industry. And this shows that, like, yes, they can do it. And the box office receipts have shown that, like, and people are willing to embrace it. So, but it's time, it's quality, it's the quality of the filmmakers, quality of the actors. There's a lot of things that play into it, but when done right, you get a -1. And yeah, I'm kind of I'm kind of just taking a little victory lap on being a fan, and also watching like a foreign film really kind of put the boots to the head of like the current Hollywood machine and just trying to outspend. And you know, that's a podcast for another day. So any final thoughts, Jessica?
I think everybody should order it when it comes
Mm-hmm.
out on Blu-ray
Oh
and
yes,
DVD.
physical media.
Yes, own it.
That's the
Own it.
yes.
I'm interested to know what the steelbook's gonna look like, or any of the
I
special editions.
I second that thing goes up for order. It will be in my pre-order list. Amazon, whoever's going to get it, because Best Buy's taking the coward's way out and they're dumping DVD. Whatever. I like Jessica knows me. She knows I have a gigantic DVD collection. I am a physical media guy. I will be a physical media guy till the day the last breath of my body leaves. Like I will be buried like a pharaoh in a tomb with all my DVDs and all my Bandai figures. I've always joked, but I'm like, no, I'm serious. There will be a tomb. You will put my mummified body in there, and you're going to shove my entire Godzilla collection in there with me, and you're going to shove all my DVDs for some wild archaeologist 1,000 years from now to come and look. And it's like, this guy has 5 copies of Van Helsing. Does a person really need 5 copies of Van Helsing? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So, but that said, I think that's all I got to say about Minus One. Do you have anything else?
No, just go see it as many times as you can. I
It's been
hope
extended. Yep.
that it can be extended even past the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a great Christmas gift for all of us, a holiday gift for all of us. And yes, please support it in its physical media format when it comes out.
This actually just brought up. I know I said it was done, but you know, it's something just came in my head in terms of Hollywood business. Toho released this. This is the first time I believe they have at least in the modern era directly released one of their own movies without going through a distributor stateside. And if any lessons have been learned this fall, is that theaters can now bypass the distribution system and go directly to the source. They did this with the Taylor Swift. The AMC did this with Taylor Swift, and they made so much damn money. And they did it with the Beyonce movie.
Yes.
And they did it with Godzilla. And so far, they are batting 3 for 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these have been undeniable successes. So, this might be a good turning point of like actually getting more foreign films out here without having to go through the horrors of, you know, the olden days of Dimension films and like Miramax, where they would butcher those things. Like they would butcher these martial arts films and then put them out because it's not, you know, American audiences aren't going to take it. It's like, no. This shows that if you have the quality, people will turn out to watch it no matter the language barrier. And that, of all things, is, to me, the best thing to come out of all this. So, all right, let's wrap this up because, holy crap, we went 2 hours. My God, that's a lot of time. But this was a movie that was worth discussing. So, on that note, Jessica, where can the good people find more of our work?
Yes, you can find us on the kaijukingdompodcast.com. We are also on YouTube. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you to Chris, who basically does all of the hard work by keeping all of those things alive. You can also always email us at the kaijukingdompodcast@gmail.com. We are also everywhere where podcasts can be found. You type in our name, we're going to be there, and you can listen to us on all your commutes, or if you're just, I don't know, doing laundry on a rainy day.
So on the YouTube front, now that we've gotten back from Japan, I have made it my goal to finally make good on my threats of putting content up. So I have been hammering out stuff. I have been diligently bringing the past archive, which has been pointed out to me when you go to any of the streamers. Um, the episode count stops at like 55 or something like that, and I've had people asking where are the older episodes. Well, I have been putting those up. They're getting up onto the YouTube site, along with a lot of video that both Jessica and I have been filming over the last year and a half on our various adventures to like G Fest, Comic Con. So I'm getting all that up. More video from Japan, um, deeper into like reviews and stuff like that. You're going to see a lot more video content coming from us going forward. All of our shows, we will have the audio version and the video version. So if you want to watch Jessica and I's beautiful faces talk about monsters, you can. I will. I'm trying my best to add a little pizzazz, so it's not just two heads, just blabbering the whole time. But so far, thank you to everyone that's been joining us in the last couple of weeks. It has been a busy month. The month of November is arguably our best month on the shows. The YouTube has grown. It's doubled in the last month, so thank you guys. Everyone that's started following us on social media, thank you very much, because we're heading upwards and onwards, and I just want to say I appreciate all you guys coming on board with us. So on that note, that will do it for this edition of the Kaiju Kingdom podcast. For myself and
Jessica.
Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time. Okay, let's give it Okay. So, do you need to take a break for a second?
Oh, I might need to use the restroom, but give me 1 second.
Go use the restroom real quick.
Hold on.